neither neurological or psychiatric conditions are things that you just catch from one day to the next, right? You don't get infected by a bug and suddenly become depressed. These are things that start happening months, if not years, before the onset of the condition. So we think the longitudinal tracking is the key thing there. You need to be monitoring the same individual for a long period of time and checking for early signs of disease. This is the big goal of the company, straddling this line before clinical, before medical, and helping people before they go on to develop full-blown conditions.
Welcome back to the Fitt Insider Podcast. I'm your host, Joe Veneri. Today I'm joined by Anna Montero and André Marques-Smith, co-founders of Atlas. In this episode, we talk about the company's behind-the-ear brain-sensing wearable, designed to track clarity, stress, and cognitive performance in real time. Plus, we discuss building the brain's version of a heart rate monitor, unlocking true personalization in mental health, and why daily brain scores may be the future of prevention. Let's get into it. The Fitt Insider Podcast is presented by EGYM. EGYM's smart fitness ecosystem is transforming healthcare through exercise. Combining strength equipment with AI-powered software and corporate wellness platform WellPass, it's leading the shift to proactive preventative health. Learn more about EGYM's intelligent workout solutions at egym.com. Anna, Andre, welcome to Fitt Insider. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Great to be here.
Excited to chat. I think it was a couple weeks ago now. We wrote an article maybe about Atlas. It was coming out of stealth. You're launching, a brain sensing wearable. And I think there was a lot of interest around that. Obviously, we were interested to see what you all have been working on kind of coming out of stealth, but get the story straight from the source today to kick things off. Maybe just a quick intro about each of you, and then what is Atlas?
Yeah, sure. So I'm André, co-founder and CTO of the company. My main background is I'm a neuroscientist. Started out as a clinical neuropsychologist. So I used to work with folks that have some form of brain damage or severe psychiatric conditions like advanced cases of OCD, as well as older people with dementia, mild cognitive impairment, and so on. And early on, I got exposed to cognitive testing as a tool to diagnose and track changes in cognition in patients, and very soon realized how limited these tools were, and subjective, subject to learning effects, and so on. And that prompted me to want to go and dive deeper into the brain. Did a PhD in neuroscience at Oxford. Spent most of my career in the UK as a researcher on several topics in the brain, and eventually decided that I'd have a good career in academia, but I felt like actually building something beyond a bunch of papers that only 50 to 100 nerds in the whole world read. And yeah, went to the tech sector, and eventually decided to start the company.
That was super short. I'm not going to be more short. I'm Spanish originally, grew up there. I thought the brain was the most fascinating thing in the world. I went to Cambridge in the UK, did neuroscience, moved into computational neuro. I was working under, the most referenced neuroimaging authors in the world. What they were trying to do was basically move away from using the DSM-5 as a diagnostic tool in psychiatry. So not sure if, the listeners are aware, but we still diagnose conditions with pen and paper checklists. So, you meet 3 criteria of 9 and you're labeled something, which is, pretty out of sync with how we do the rest of medicine. You're always, drawing a blood sample or quantifying something, right? And so they were basically, presenting certain visual or, auditory stimuli to patients while imaging the brain in order to find biomarkers for things like psychosis, depression, etc., which is wonderful. And they were going to use the algorithms for early detection, even better. But I dropped out of academia because I was like, how are you planning to deploy early detection algorithms when no one goes to the doctor until there's always something there, right? It's not like going to the dentist once a year. Hopefully you do that. Or, using your Apple Watch for fitness, email. If it detects an arrhythmia, it's going to let you know to go to the doctor, right? We don't wear anything on our heads that could be running those algorithms in the background. So dropped out, went into the startup sector, tried to build models of brain activity from existing wearables. So, your Aura, Whoop, Polar straps, and a bunch of existing headsets. As you can imagine, peripheral body data like HRV or skin temperature are pretty weak correlates of the mind. And existing headsets, first, they're not very, consumer friendly. But then second, when you move your head, blink or speak, there's so much noise introduced into the system that you really can't use that data for anything, right? Let alone call that a wearable device. So that was on the one side. On the other side, I don't have to tell you, but increasing number of people into longevity biohacking, Huberman and Tia. We're moving from wrist devices to ring devices to patch devices, right? Aura has done an insane job at demonstrating the market there. But a lot of people, there is a subset of people that use it solely for physical and physiological purposes, but a lot of people are using these as a proxy for how they feel, right? So the things that some people really care about are, okay, how stressed am I? Like, how am I going to perform cognitively today, right? What is my attention level right now? And so, we got the team together. We've been going for 5 years or so, beat and sell all of this time. It was a ton of work. At first, we were trying to solve the, motion artifacts issue. So basically trying to develop sensors that worked way better and could actually work in motion conditions of any sort. And we did that and it was great. We got, 10x better signal to noise ratio than anything out there in motion conditions. And then we kind of proceeded to algos, a ton of stuff done on that side. And now we're at the very exciting stage of, product development, marketing, branding, whatnot. Recently came out of stealth and it's been a lot of fun. So, yeah.
I want to talk about, okay, what is it? How do we arrive at that form factor? But even the part that you just mentioned there, behind the scenes working for 5 years, even to get to this place, was during that time, were you even sure that you would get to the stage of like, oh, we have the concept, we have the product, and we're ready to do that? And like, what was happening during that time?
Yeah, we always had a high degree of confidence that we could get the technology to work. So the team was really coming from a point where we knew that what we wanted to optimize for was being able to record in people who are moving, speaking, walking, doing all the kinds of wonderful things that humans do. This has been a big limitation in neuroscience up until now. Unless you drill a hole in someone's skull, which is not a pleasant procedure to do, you really need people to sit very still, not even blink, speak, move, do anything in order to get a good quality brain recording. And I worked in the field of invasive brain implants for a long time. Our lead sensors engineer, Dr. Joanna Neto, also, we go back 8 years already. And so we had a pretty good idea when we started the company of how we could build and re-engineer EEG sensors in order for them to be able to work well in the real world. That's not to say we got it right the first time. We most certainly didn't. Like anything in science, it's 5% inspiration, 95% transpiration. That was certainly the case for us. But we were very confident that eventually we're going to be able to get there. And I think the key there was also coming up with something. The challenge has been coming up with something that not only works well technically, but that the average consumer is able to pick up, put on, and use at home unsupervised. That's been one of the big challenges, right? In taking neuroscience outside of the lab and into the real world.
And I feel like that is not answering your question, but I'll build on top of that. That is really, really crucial. So, what Aura has done insanely well is two things, right? Like they've taken best in class physiological sensors that have a key role in healthcare, so PPG, temperature, movement, and they put that into a form factor that enabled consumers, so any person, anywhere, to wear that for 24 hours a day, right? So what that does, it creates a flywheel data. And that helps in algo development to the point where, now they've discovered the power of the sensors in, anything from illness detection to women's health, hormonal management, whatnot, right? So that's basically, if you take a step back, what they did is signal quality, form factor. So that's what we set out to do, but with a completely different sensor. And I won't get into it yet, but yeah.
Yeah. And that's, basically leads us to creating the wearable itself. It's been kind of described as, and you can correct me to what I get wrong, right? But behind the ear sensor, brain sensing device. It was earlier, I think this year, we wrote something about like forecasting trends or like what could be next. And basically it was like brain monitoring is moving beyond the lab. There's tests, there's imaging, there's a need for personalized protocols. And basically there's going to be an evolution towards like, what does a daily brain score look like, in the same way that there's a Whoop or a readiness score? So I guess how close were we to that? and what is the actual kind of form factor, and then what people will be able to glean from the data that they're getting.
Yeah,
Yeah,
100%.
absolutely. So, yeah, we're both been tracking ourselves
Form factor.
with the device for a while now. In our case, there were a couple different things that went into the form factor. Okay, so one of them was that we knew that headbands, headsets, they've been tried before. They don't work. People don't want to wear those, even remote working most of the time. So we knew we needed something that was very discreet and small, but also a bit of a statement, right? We're not trying to hide the device. The device looks beautiful, in our modest opinion, but it needs to be something that looks good. The second point is that one thing that we've been very intentional about in the company is that people have tried to kind of bend the EEG sensors to integrate with non-form factors like glasses, headphones, and other types of things that people are very familiar with. And there's certainly advantages to thinking along that line. But the issue you're having there is that you're constraining the performance of the sensor in order to fit into the form factor that you're kind of forcing down on it. We took a step back and we thought, look, if we're going to do this right, we need the data quality to be unimpeachable, right? And the way to do that is actually to flip the equation and to say, what is the ideal way that we can build an EEG sensor for data quality, especially in motion conditions, and what form factor can we build around that? Now, that's been a risk. And when we were first pitching the company to investors, 4 years ago, people used to question us on that a lot. But it's something that's worked out pretty well, and now we actually get praise for the form factor, which is interesting to see that kind of reversal. Happy to pick up on your question about the score as well. So essentially, the approach that we've taken there is a bit different from what you may have seen in the field of cognitive neuroscience and psychology before, right? So the way that people have normally gone about trying to solve this problem is through supervised learning nets. So taking recordings of brain activity in a human and then getting the person to do a cognitive test. So the cognitive test being the thing that you want to predict from brain activity. The issue with that is that cognitive tests are not a particularly good proxy for a lot of cognitive performance behaviors, and B, they're extremely prone to learning effects. Just like an IQ test, if you do an IQ test repeatedly, you're going to be able to game it. Just like SATs or GREs, there's huge practice effects. So you can't really monitor people, see how their cognition is changing over time, and see how the EEG or other brain features changing over time, and draw a correspondence. What we believe that we needed to do was to actually take a step back and say, okay, decision-making, reasoning, these are not quantities or variables that exist in the physical world that we can measure directly. They're latent variables that are being inferred. We need to go into the brain and measure something that is a physical quantity, something that you can objectively measure. And the idea that we landed on was reporting how clean your brain activity is. So essentially, the way we go about this is you can think of your brain as an orchestra, right? So when every neuron is firing at exactly the right time, you're getting power, you're getting amplitude, you're getting very clean signals propagating between different circuits in the brain. If each one of them is running around doing different things, all you get is dissonance. Now, for cognitive performance to be perfect, for anything like memory decision-making to happen well, you need a lot of circuits in the brain to cooperate with each other. So what we're tracking is actually the signal-to-noise ratio of communication between different parts of the brain, using temporal lobe as a proxy, because that's the thing that we can record extremely well behind the ear.
Correct. So basically, in terms of features for user, we're going to be doing things from clarity of mind. So that's basically the opposite of brain fog, if you will, indicative of, how well you're going to perform cognitively that day. We're going into attention, stress, sleep, and brain age. So there's many known clinical biomarkers from EEG, basically took that knowledge, translated it into these consumer features. But when you see those features, they're actually built on, the back of 100 years of validated neuroscience. The positioning for the company is always with the mindset of obviously being a revolutionarily like healthcare transforming monitoring system. But the way to do that is by creating this kind of perfect consumer experience, right? So we've been hyper focused on that. But yeah, we created these features, and the work behind them would enable us to, look at brain age over time, which creates opportunities in, MCI, Alzheimer's, dementia. Within sleep, peripheral sensors are limited in what they can get when it comes to microarchitecture of sleep. So with EEG, we can look at that. We can look at things like insomnia, stress, anxiety, depression. They're all known kind of clinical biomarkers. So you can only imagine, how much we're going to be able to find when we're collecting the largest brain data sets that exist.
Yeah, it's almost this using Aura as like the comparable. There are a lot of things that track. It's like a unique form factor. You're sensing things. You're giving people a score. They're able to adapt their habits over time. But with both just where the technology is today and what people are able to then, the behaviors they're able to modify based on that, it's like, how quickly can I see those changes? Okay, I'm getting deeper sleep. I'm feeling more rested. My recovery levels are improving, but on a minute by minute basis, like what am I actually tracking? In this case, with the brain, it's like you have a whole different, set of data that you're able to and then adapt and train based on that. So this is a kind of a loaded question that I'm working towards. But on one hand, do you think there's like a hurdle getting people to that place where it's like we can sense your brain in real time? Like we don't quite have any, like there's a heart rate monitor, essentially a heart rate monitor, real time tracking for brain data. Like, do you foresee like the challenge in articulating that? And then on the other side, I want to get into like actually changing behavior, but just starting to get people in the frame that like this is unlocking something that we currently don't have access to unless you are doing these like, very kind of significant medical testing.
So I think it's pretty clear to people because we continually hear all of the questions that remain unanswered. So, people spend hundreds of dollars on supplements every month and all sorts of other things, and they literally have no way to measure the effect that any of those things have on the brain, right? It's like, I don't know, you're trying to lose or gain weight and you don't have a scale, right? Like, it's impossible. So, which nootropics are actually working for me, right? Like, what happens to my brain after I'm on TikTok for 1 hour, right? Like, which song should I be listening to right now to like boost my flow? Like, should I be doing this kind of, strenuous exercise at this time of the day versus something else later in the day if you're trying to optimize for your mind, right? As opposed to your body. So there's like all sorts of questions that people have. And so if you frame it from the lens of we're going to be able to answer those questions, then I think,
Mhm.
don't know if that answered the question, but
Yeah, let me touch on another point, which is quite interesting, that Joe raised, which is the idea of different timescales for change, right? So
yes.
much like I suppose that in a heart rate monitor, the equivalent of this would be if you go out for a zone two run, for example, you're going to expect your heart rate to change immediately in some way and to change while you're doing the exercise. But the interesting thing that you're wanting to track there is more for long-term change, right? You're asking, okay, if I do 45 minutes of this every day for 3 months, what is my VO2 max going to be? What is my resting heart rate
Yep.
going to be? In the brain, we see similar things, right? So there's stuff, for example, that we're able to do very well with our clarity score and our features in terms of showing the effect that something like drinking alcohol has in terms of your brain's performance straight away. Of course, alcohol takes some time to get metabolized and to have an effect in the nervous system. But let's say in our studies, after half an hour to 45 minutes of someone consuming vodka, we can already tell that the brain is under the influence. So there's an angle which is immediate, right? What's something that I'm doing right now, which is changing my brain in this very moment, not just for the negative, but for the positive as well. There's things that we can see, such as taking caffeine or going out for a walk once your concentration has been dipping. Interventions that, to be honest, people are well familiar with, but which are lacking quantification, and that is a very important point to drive, as well as behaviors which are expanding in time and slowly changing your brain, right? So if the first thing that I do every morning when I wake up is to go on Instagram and TikTok and spend half an hour over it while I'm having breakfast, how is that changing my brain over the course of 1 month, 3 months, 6 months? And we have the ability to track that both in the short term. Some things are easier to see in the short term, but some things, such as this TikTok example, for instance, are things that you're going to want to track over a protracted period of time and really try and steer people towards, okay, let's introduce some positive change
Yeah.
in terms of your habits.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, like, technology is wonderful, right?
Mhm.
Like, it's, an insane tool. It's not about, oh, technology is harmful, this and that. Like,
Yeah.
no, you just need to know, like, how to use it, right?
Yeah.
But it is true that, you know, everything in your life affects your mind in real time, right? And it's impossible for a human to keep track of
Yeah.
all the inputs and do, the deciphering themselves of like,
Yeah.
oh, I should be talking to this person at this time, not at that time. I should be not be listening to this. I shouldn't be doing this type of workout. This supplement only works at this specific. It's like impossible. We're all like really busy, right?
Yeah.
And if you add on top of that all of the external inputs that we're getting constantly bombarded with on socials, then yeah, it's pretty hard to, you can control your environment to a certain extent, but at the end of the day, you need to train yourself to basically be able to,
Yeah.
react. So yeah, that's what we're trying to give people. We're trying to give people the power to, know those things as close to real
Yeah.
time as possible in order to be able to make a change in the moment. And it's very important that you brought that up because indeed, with other types of data, they're very slow moving, slow changing. And so you wouldn't be able to do that in real time. So yeah, we think that's really key as well. Yeah.
This episode of the Fitt Insider Podcast is brought to you by EGYM. EGYM makes some of the most innovative strength training machines on the market, but that's only one part of their integrated ecosystem. With connected fitness equipment, AI-powered gym software, and a comprehensive corporate wellness offering, it's forging the future of preventative health. Partnering with companies worldwide, EGYM's WellPass program improves employee health by expanding access to premier fitness and health facilities. Upgrading gym floors, EGYM equips every operator with smart equipment and AI tools to create hyper-personalized training plans for every exerciser. Putting it all together, they're transforming healthcare through exercise. Experience the power of EGYM's ecosystem at egym.com. Yeah, this kind of idea of trying to lose weight but not having a scale, right? That it's like, how do you even go about it? So now starting to demystify, quantify what's happening. And then the other side of that obviously is then what are we showing users in terms of the data? There's gonna be so much, like, what do we show them? How do we package it in a way that's going to make it useful and actionable? And then what types of nudges, behavior changes do we want to start to be able to help them with as we do decipher and then make sense of the data?
I can't disclose. We're working on, just a beautiful, hyper simple, but like pristine representation of the mind. And we're super excited for it. So that's coming out pretty soon, maybe by the time this podcast comes out. But yeah, we know that users like to have data, but everyone is really busy. And so the app is designed in such a way that it goes from, a beautiful, in 1 second you can get an understanding of all these dimensions of your mind, right? Whether it's like clarity, your stress, your attention level, whatever. In 1 second you're going to be able to grasp your mind in that moment. And obviously we will use scores like people are familiar with in other wearables, 0 to 100, whatnot. But then obviously, you can dive in deeper in the app and get all the graphs and everything. But even the graphs, we're being very careful with the way we do them and always trying to have conversational layers so that it's very intuitive to understand how to read the graph. So yeah, we're working a ton on that. The UI UX, our team is insanely good. So yeah, super excited to share those. But yeah.
Let me add something to that, just highlighting something you said, which I think is quite important, which is we want the way that the user interacts with data in our product to be very hierarchical, right? Such that the user can choose what level exactly they want to engage with the data. And some people are going to be happy to just look at this high level visualization that we're working on and just look at their score and a couple of other features that you get from that visualization, and that's it. Some people are going to want to go into the graph. Some people are going to want to go into the features that drive the graph, right? So I think and you already see this to some extent in other wearable devices as well. To us, it's a core belief that you need to do it hierarchically. And another point I would make, which you touched upon, that I think is quite interesting, and that you need to be careful in wearables, but particularly wearables designed for brain health, for example, and cognitive health as well, which is the topic of notifications, right? If you're trying to engage with someone and help them be more present, be more focused, be more in control of how they're directing their attention, are notifications the best way to get a person to come back into the app? No, I kind of feel like that's running counter to what you're trying to do. So these are things that we're trying to experiment and innovate on. One thing that we're kind of converging on is the idea of touch points and habits, right? So routines, set points of the day when we're training you to come in and check in on how you're doing, or reflect at the end of the day as to how the day went, and log some ideas, and review some data at the end of the day, instead of pushing something onto you and kind of, waving it in your face and trying to get you to come into the app. So we're very keen on staying quite mission oriented in this aspect, of not being, hypocritical about helping you with your focused attention, and then at the same time trying to divert it.
100%. I feel like Joe, we didn't give you any insights into the app, but we can do another one of these in a couple of weeks. Yeah.
No, I think, and look, we knew this going into it, right? This is still kind of behind the scenes. Things are developing, like the product's not out there yet. And so we'll be mindful of that. We're just excited to get, the kind of inside story of what to look forward to and how you're thinking about it, which I think is potentially at this phase, like the more interesting thing is like, we keep saying as you bring this to market, like, what are those considerations and what has gone into what is already 5 years of development and thinking about what the future of this space looks like?
Joe, I was say one thing about that, and you asked before about interventions and whatnot. There's some like insane creators out there, like yourselves, like Huberman, whatnot, right? People that have very good backgrounds and have curated an extensive list of things that work for people or for the general population, right? But the problem is like as you're going about your day, you don't really know what to do in that moment. You might listen to a podcast, super interesting, whatever, and then you forget like literally 50% of what was on there, unless you're, very like detailed and write those things down, whatever. So we're not like revolutionizing the type of insights that we're going to give people as to what they can do to improve their states, right? We're just, serving them the right things to do at the right time. If they have 1 minute versus 5 minutes versus 20 minutes, those are going to be different things. And importantly, more and more over time, they will be personalized to people, right? Because something that works for most people doesn't necessarily work for you, or it doesn't necessarily work for you at this point in time today after XYZ things happen to you, right? And so it's not that we're revolutionizing, the offering in terms of what you can do in order to change your state, but we're trying to be your kind of guide in the moment in real time, and limit your decision paralysis and give you things that we think are 100% going to work in the moment. Sorry.
When you think about, maybe something like a Whoop is more performance oriented, and something like an Aura more, at least initially, obviously all these things are expanding as time goes on, more sleep and maybe recovery oriented. When you think about the wedge for like brain health, is it focus? Is it clarity? Is it cognitive performance? Like the things that you want to check those boxes for people, and then like you said, help them make those decisions maybe in the moment. What's the low hanging fruit of, oh, I feel this, or like I was able to achieve this, or this is the outcome that I got by using the device?
I would say it's consistency in mental performance over time, compounding in time, and allowing you to achieve great things. So early on in the company, we actually ran an interesting study on a series of masters and PhD students, and other knowledge workers, where we found that people's cognitive performance over the span of 2 weeks can vary up to 30%. Okay, there's an analogy that I like to do here, which is, if you're going into the gym every day and lifting, and if your bench press were to drop from one day to the next by 30%, you would be, what the hell is going on here, right? You think, am I sick? Did I tear a muscle or something? What's going on? But we've somehow gotten used to the idea that this is just what happens with our brains and our cognitive performance. So, to me, if I had to sum up in one expression, that would be it. That would be that consistency, putting you in control. So giving you the insight that you need in order to be able to, kind of go from extremes in your mental performance over time to honing it and being very consistent and being able to say, okay, today such and such is going on in terms of my cognitive performance, and I know how to act on it in order to get it to a high level.
Yeah. Andre's great at synthesizing concepts, so I'm not going to try to follow that. That was good.
Maybe a couple more questions before we wrap up. One just being, you kind of alluded to the fact that like, hey, we can't really disclose too much now because we have other stuff going. Just even at this point, having, made the formal announcement of the company and then getting to the point where things start getting live? Like, what are the biggest, what's on the checklist? What's on the to-do? Like, what are you doing between now and like, okay, it's live and out in the world?
Yeah, so I mean, we came out of stealth. It wasn't meant to be like a launch or anything, but we got, I don't know, like 500,000 impressions like across posts. It was crazy. We got an insane amount of like inbound. So, there's an insane kind of talent acquisition pipeline. So we're gonna be building, an even more insane team for sure. And then, we've had a chance to we're lucky that a lot of top performers in their respective fields are wanting to try this out and whatnot. And so we will be having, obviously, we're doing a ton of testing. So we're doing beta testing from now until the launch. So there's several different tracks in that. And honestly, for me, from the side of product, it's like a super exciting time because basically, we've got, as you can imagine, a lot of people would use this in very different ways, right? Like, what can you do with brain data? Well, a million things, right? So what we've done is we've built, MVP versions of all of the hypotheses for the features that we have. And we're going to be testing those, A/B testing, pruning, really want to make sure the experience is as simple and impactful as possible. And so, yeah, for a product person, this is like a super exciting time. And then, yeah, we're going to be gearing up for the launch. So, we're going to be doing a ton of very fun stuff on the, brand side of things and whatnot. We can't talk about any of that yet, but you'll see it soon. So, yeah, basically, it's testing user feedback, a ton of brand moments, and yeah, growing the team and yeah, continuing to build.
Yeah. On the technical side, there's a lot of work that we're building up to. So we have always been running studies within the company. We've opened up our own lab, and we've got 8 RAs collecting data 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, and we'll be running some new studies. So a few things that we're very interested in studying at the moment are stress over time and what signs of that we can pick up in people's behavior, in people's brain activity. We're also very interested in metabolics and nutrition, for instance, and how that could be changing your brain activity. So there's a range of different things that are not super great to study in lab conditions, which lend themselves much more to in real life type of studies.
Yeah.
For instance, we've done a lot in terms of the effect of things such as alcohol or caffeine in brain activity in the short term. And so there's more of these studies coming because on one side they help us strengthen our algorithm and get it to become more and more and more accurate. At the same time, these are the kinds of behaviors that people are doing on a day-to-day basis, right? These are the things that people are doing that will change their cognitive performance and their brain health over time. So we need to ensure that we have enough data to really say powerful things about how your brain is changing as you're living your life.
And then recognizing that we're still super early and we have to, all those things to cover. When you zoom out, and whether it's when you're talking internally or thinking about what the company becomes or pitching it to investors, are you talking about, hey, we're building like the brain health OS, like we're building the future of mapping the brain and tracking it. We're measuring this, like you said, over time and brain aging. Like, what is that big vision of, if we do everything right, like this is the bigger goal that we're working towards?
So both me and Anna have always been very determined from the beginning in starting the company, in starting to work on and addressing things such as the prevention of neurological and psychiatric conditions. And we took this road very consciously of going through consumer in the company because neither neurological or psychiatric conditions are things that you just catch from one day to the next, right? You don't get infected by a bug and suddenly become depressed. These are things that start happening months, if not years, before the onset of the condition. So we think the longitudinal tracking is the key thing there. You need to be monitoring the same individual for a long period of time and checking for early signs of disease. And if you're starting to see that there's preclinical interventions, well, the hope is that there's preclinical behavioral interventions that you can do to prevent the individual getting down to that point in the cliff, because it's hard to come back from here to go up to here, right? But if you pick up people when they're here, it's much easier. So I think to us this is a big goal of the company, straddling this line before clinical, before medical, and helping people before they go on to develop full-blown conditions.
Agreed. Yeah, I mean, it's basically that. It's like building on the shoulders of all the giants that came before us and did insanely good work in, within academia and whatnot. A lot of those things are kind of behind closed doors. unfortunately. And so, yeah, it's just kind of trying to bring some of that into the real world. Yeah, that's the overarching mission.
So just to run that thought off, I think we think about these things as a continuum, as a spectrum, right? So in a lot of psychiatric and neurological conditions, it's not that there's a strict line between health and disease. It's more that there's a spectrum. So we very much see eventually there being a medical and clinical arm of the company. There's in constant dialogue with this consumer side as well.
I think at this point, there's a part 2 that will come once things are more public, once we get out there and you're able to kind of talk about what you have going on. But for now, in wrapping up, I think maybe the first podcast you guys have done, and so and talking about the company, what is it that people should kind of like follow along for, look out? Is it go to the website, check it out? Is it, hey, stay tuned for more kind of launches? Like whether it's promotional or whether it's where to learn more, like where would you point them? What would you say?
Yeah. So we 100% want people to join the waitlist for sure, because we'll be, dripping some very cool updates pretty soon. So that's atlaswearable.com. We just came out of stock in LinkedIn and Twitter, so you can follow us there. Same handle. Instagram coming soon. Need to get at you guys' level on that side. And yeah, we're always looking for, I don't know, like insanely talented, scrappy individuals that are really passionate about this space. This is a super exciting time in the company. So yeah, if anyone's listening and, this kind of resonated with them, please definitely reach out to us. We're growing pretty fast. So excited to see what comes through out of this. And thank you so much, Joe. It was a real pleasure. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll make sure everything is easy to find. Of course, we'll be following along and bring folks the latest updates, and super grateful for the time today. So yeah, thanks for being here.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you got value from the conversation, please consider subscribing and sharing the podcast with a friend or colleague. It's a massive help. And if you want more content like this, including news and insights on the latest industry developments, subscribe to the Fitt Insider newsletter at insider.fit.co. And one more thing, you can learn more about our recruiting and consulting services at fit.co. That's FITT.co. I'll see you here next week.